right, so the highlight in our mountains has dried. So we're going to just add the circle of sun in the sky. And I'm just using a fine-ish tip paintbrush for this. It's not wanting to paint as easily as I would like it. There we go. And I'm just using the white right on the yellow. I want it to be nice and bright. And you can place your sun wherever really, but I tend to divide my work in thirds and either do it in the third here or the third here. I like it better than having it right in the center. It's just a little bit more interesting visually. All right, once you've gotten it coated nicely, I'm just going to add just a little bit of, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a complete circle, so I'm just going to, as if there was some clouds in front of it. And then for the rays of light, I'm just going to put a little bit of paint on my brush, dab it off, and then I'm just doing lines, and I want to have barely any paint on my brush. You can always add more to it. Better if you go over the same line as you had before. But you can't really take it away. And it just looks a little bit more natural if you've got a drier brush there. And I tend to work in the rule of thirds, so either 3 or 5. And it doesn't have to be super, super bright. You don't want to have very bright lines because that doesn't look very natural either. All right, I'm just going to leave it as that. Clean my brush off here. And then I'm going to do the tree line. So the tree line is going to be black. I may need more than that, but it's good enough for now. So I'm going to take that finer brush. I'm going to just do a line across. As high as or as low as you want it to be. I want to make sure to leave enough room for my foreground, so I don't necessarily want to see a ton of the mountains. So that's high enough for me. That's just going to give me a guideline to work off of. There we go. I'm going to use this brush here, and just with the corner of it, just kind of do brush strokes up. I don't need to worry necessarily about going underneath it because we're actually going to paint this entire bottom black. And you also want to make sure that they have varying heights. So these trees are really, really far away. You're not going to see detail in any way, shape, or form. We're going to put detail in the front trees. We don't need to put detail in the back ones. But if you look at a forest in the distance, they're not all the same height. They are different heights. So some are going to be a little bit higher, some are going to be a little bit lower. We want to fill in that entire line. We don't want to see our line here, otherwise it's going to look a little bit odd. If you happen to get a clump like I just got there and you don't really like it, then just go add a couple more trees, make some a little bit brighter, make some a little bit higher. I'm doing this one with black. If you want, you could mix your colors, mix some blue and yellow to get a really dark green, and you could do it in that. And if you did it with a dark green, you would get a little bit more definition between the tree line here and the tree in the front here. But for this sample, I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mix a green for these pine trees here just so that these have the trees in the foreground have a little bit of a different color than the black that I'm using for this. It also gives you an opportunity to see the difference between the two. And don't be afraid if you look back at your line and there's something that you want to fill in, go fill it in. There we go. All right. Now I actually do need some black here. Now you'll see during the video I put the brushes in the water, and that's totally fine. After each one I clean my brushes off and I don't leave them sitting in the water. You don't want to leave brushes sitting in the water because it'll affect the bristles. It sometimes bends them. And then sometimes, especially if you happen to leave them in water, say overnight or whatever, sometimes it can seep up into the wood and can end up ruining your brush. So something not to do. If you're doing it for a few minutes while you're in the middle of painting something, totally fine, but you just don't want to do that over a prolonged period of time. All right, so this entire bottom is going to be painted black so that we have a black surface to work on for that. I need some more. These paints that I'm using are golden paints, and I love them because they have a lot of pigment to them. They're nice and creamy paints. And I find majority of the time when I'm painting, one coat is enough. I don't have to go over and do a second coat, which I absolutely love. I think inexpensive paints are great when you're starting and learning a technique, but you tend to use a lot of paint and you tend to have to go over and do many layers sometimes because there's just not very much pigment in them in order to cover your surface. So definitely worth it to get better quality paints. All right, so that is good. I'm gonna leave that to completely dry. Once that is totally dry, we'll start working on our water. We'll see you then.